Hey America. Um, Sorry, I don't have a very good webcam. Um, I just wanted to try this thing out because some people have told me that I should do things like this because I think because I agitate them by talking at them a lot about things that they're probably not trying to hear while they're making dinner, hanging out and stuff. So I thought I would do something like this because I'm not very good at writing, even though a lot of people think I am. So not a lot of people. I didn't mean it that way. We'll just scratch that. We'll edit that. So anyway, today I was in a mythology class at Loyola University here in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, and we were talking about um, Joseph Campbell, and uh, I got to getting all messed up about it. I just got so excited and enthused, and I put on my headphones on the way home um, from school on the train. I was listening to Jay Reatard, and this happens to me a lot when I get out of that class that I kind of freak out a little bit. So I've been on this kick of trying to figure out what is the mythology of contemporary America, and I hardly think that I'll be able to figure that out in one setting or explain it in one setting. But I think best in like conversation and explanation. And since nobody wants to talk to me about it, I'll just talk to myself or you about it, and then hopefully I'll figure it out. Maybe I can make a couple settings out of it if it seems enjoyable to anybody. So, um, my thesis is that the contemporary American mythology is a sort of heavily ritual based, though non-orthodox ritual based martyr worship, and that manifests itself in a couple of really important ways in a couple of different areas. The first and most obvious way to me is in music, is in the kind of pop culture of music. Um, Obviously, you have really notable examples like Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Tupac, Jimi Hendrix, lots of different people. Not even really just focusing on the 27 Club or anything like that, but people that are innovators, and they're recognized as sort of bringing something unique to the American musical culture, the lexicon of it, in their own right, in their own instrument, whatever, But at any rate, they're seen as innovators, even if they aren't necessarily. That's a whole other debate. But the point is, they do this thing, and once they get noticed on like a national cultural level, they very quickly rocket up to this like larger than life status, and all of a sudden, a huge swath of the American population is just eating everything that these people do, right? And little 15, 16-year-old boys are like dreaming of being Kurt Cobain, and then he fucking kills himself or dies in whatever whatever means you want to believe. And anyway, the point is like it's after the death that they become immortalized, and that's the case with all of them. Jim Morrison, the examples that I used, Tupac. Now, all of these people were famous before they died, It's not to imply that you have to die to become famous. It's simply to say that like your status as a hero. Again, I want to take this back to like a mythological level. Your hero status is elevated to like demigod status because you died. And in an abstraction, in the same way, in the mythological way, you died in this sort of like non-orthodox, non-explained way. You died in the pursuit of this thing that you were the hero at. It's kind of recognized in the American lexicon that it's like sex, drugs, rock and roll. You gave your life to that. And because most people in the world, but in America specifically, are very beholden to this culture of music, on this pop culture, um, in the loosest sense of the word when I say pop culture, um, they they you become in the same way that Christ was to Christians or is to Christians now, you become the medium, the bridge by which people access this higher plane by being this Kurt Cobain figure, for example. There is this exposition of some sort of nirvana that is attained by this grunge rock thing, right? And so you have your sort of like apostle people, um, and then you have the layperson, and the layperson accesses it through this methodology, but the cultic moment, the moment whereby like they transcend into this thing that you did for them as this Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Tupac type person, is by the sort of immortality that is it's a funny choice of words, but anyway, it's this culture around your death. You died for it. You died for them. It's a salvational experience. So I'll come back to that later probably. What's interesting though is that I started picking at this idea and trying to think about like how else this manifests, because it's not to say that, as I said, it's not to say that like you don't become famous, you don't become valuable, you don't become whatever until you die. I think that's an oversimplification. It's not true. There's plenty of people that are famous that are still alive that defy expectation that they're still alive. It defies logic that they're still alive. People like Chuck Berry, who's arguably one of the most significant and innovative people in the history of Western music. Period. I mean, at least Western since America came on the scene. Um, and he's still alive. He's still trying to shake his fucking leg across the stage. He's like 500 years old. But anyway, when he dies, I guarantee you, he will become much bigger, right? It's lucky for Elvis that he died much younger. So I was looking at other facets of where this because obviously there's not really, at least in the scope of pop culture reaches most people in America. There's not really a body that is espousing this as like a doctrine, you know. Um, and I'm certainly not either. I'm not trying to suggest that people should die or that like death is an important part of fame or anything like that. I'm just looking at these weird mechanisms that are taking place sort of right beneath the surface. And so I started to look at other areas outside of pop culture, at least musical pop culture. I started thinking about movies, right? And there's this thing that's particularly frustrating to me is all these fucking World War II movies. It just is astounding that like we can't seem to stop making these goddamn regurgitated World War II movies, and it's perhaps the most cataclysmic event in world history as far as like most different groups affected by it. It's certainly not um, a period of world history which isn't deserving of quite a large degree of attention. And with that being recognized, there is a huge um, portion of the like Western movie complex which has been given to it, which is well deserved, with the Schindler's Lists and movies like that. Even Saving Private Ryan. I mean, there's plenty of there's plenty of great stories about World War II. There's plenty of great movies about World War II. Um, but the thing that I wanted to look at is the phenomenon that causes this thing to just be the dead horse that keeps getting beat. More than Vietnam, more than the Revolutionary War, more than seemingly any other conflict, but what it is that, well, what it has in common with the Revolutionary War is it is, in our minds, in our sort of collective mythos, it's sort of encapsulated as a great event where all the sons and daughters of America were so willing to die. And here again is the connection is that, it's not it's not hard to die. I mean, I bet you just the things that are within arm's reach, I could probably do it right now very easily. But it wouldn't, I mean, except that I'd be broadcasting on YouTube. It probably wouldn't have very much of an impact. It's the willingness to die for a perceived thing that people hold to be very important. In the case of music, it is this sort of cultural thing which has a uh, religious thing. That's sort of what I'm getting at, right? And then there is, in World War II, is the fight against fascism, the world fight, in Germany, Italy, Japan, Hungary, other places, the fight for fascism, the fight, for what they perceive to be a value, um, was worth dying for. But if you were somebody that took that call, be it even if you were drafted, which is something that gets left out of it a lot of times, it's very seldom that any of these people have any choice. But nonetheless, you made that sacrifice. You made that sacrifice. It's not so much about the decision, because normally when it's a case in mythological terms, normally when it's a case, it's the hero's transition. It's not really a decision. It can be presented as a decision, like, yes, I have the decision. If I'm being drafted, I have the decision to try to flee. I have the decision to possibly go to jail or be executed, depending on the case that we're talking about. But ultimately, it's not really a decision, because those are all stupid decisions. I mean, I myself would definitely take the flee or jail. But the point is, the veterans coming home from World War II were celebrated as heroes for their commitment and their willingness to self-sacrifice for the cause of liberty in the struggle against tyranny. It's classic, right? In the Revolutionary War, this is again in the American lexicon, um, you have this dual set of characters here. You have the founding fathers, who are these noblemen, right? Their shoulders are back and their necks are straight, or whatever that noble people do, and they are, these sort of, they're kind of like the guys you didn't expect, but they had all the moves. That's why we like them, because they're so charismatic. But they're charismatic in a call, which is, of course, if you read the history, it's just really not that accurate. I mean, it's there. It's definitely up for interpretation, and they're certainly not. They're certainly far from the worst guys on the block at the time. But we make them out to be, you know, fucking Gandhi, and they sure as fuck weren't. Um, that's not the point. The point is that they represent the gentleman's side, and then you have, like the Patriot Mel Gibson, that whole sort of like, I'm just a farmer and I have my musket and I'm going to go run these fucking lobsterbacks out of here, and we're gonna be free. We're gonna be free people, and that's a huge distortion of the actual historical events, but that's not really important right now. What I'm talking about is, why are those people so important to us? is again, for all of them, the famous quote, "Give me liberty or give me death." It's the perfect encapsulation of what I'm talking about. America is obsessed with that because in the postmodern world, we don't have that relationship. We create it arbitrarily, the gun control debate, but we don't really feel it. We don't feel it pushing on us. After 9/11, it's been all just like aesthetic issues, and um, so we're obsessed with these figures because we perceive them to be these great sacrifices to liberty, and if they survived it, then it's like, well, good on you anyway. Maybe that's a little bit of a correlation to like Keith Richards and Mick Jagger for still being alive, despite their commitment to the liberty of drug use and rock and roll. So that's the first two. First two, right, is rock stars and soldiers, and we also feel it. I would say to a disproportionate level, worldly speaking, we feel it for our soldiers, and they deserve respect. Again, please don't get me wrong. I'm simply looking at this as a psyche issue that's very interesting to me. But we're obsessed with putting people in the position of honoring things for us. Because you think the standard American population are not rock stars. They're not even soldiers. They're not heroes, right? They're standard people. They go to work. They come home. They have dinner and they go to bed. They repeat the next day. Um, so they feed on these symbols, and they can create them in any variety of ways. So then I was looking further. I started looking at political icons in America. Um, isn't it interesting, that some of the most profound, um, well, I'm not sure if I'm ready to back that statement up, but the presidents, we'll say the presidents that are remembered as being the most significant are mostly all presidents that died, right? Um, Died particularly in untimely ways or particularly in office, which is not to say all of them, because you always have those kind of obscure assassinations or assassination attempts. Um, but you have, Kennedy, you have FDR, died in office, right? You have the Lincoln, of course, um, and even Reagan didn't die in office, but I came upon Reagan in this way in my mind because Reagan's very interesting because now he is the edifice of the Republican Party, and a lot of the things that they claim in his name are very overstated, and they're not really things that he, at least, went so far as they now do with. But he didn't jettison to this demigod status again until he died, and then he became the hero of you know no government by means of government or whatever the GOP thinks nowadays. It's hard to ever understand really, but again, it's a culture of um, if you look at Abraham Lincoln's approval ratings, or you look at the percentage by which he won re-election, it's minuscule. I mean, it makes Obama look like the most well-loved guy in American history, which of course, for those of us living in today's day and age, we know that it's a very divided country right now. We know that we're having a very big problem with divisiveness across the aisle, or whatever you want to say. In America, well, I mean, Lincoln won. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was something like 39%. It was very low comparatively, um, and he suffered just drastically low approval ratings throughout his whole presidency, and yet he's remembered as the great emancipator, the great unifier. He's remembered in this, I would say, populist way. He's remembered as like a hero of America, and heroes have the popular favor of the people. Um, why? Because he died. Because he died to that end. Now, that's not the only reason why. I'm not trying to discount, the things that he did. And again, I'm not trying to say because that would indicate that just dying in the line of duty guarantees you hero status, and that's obviously not true. But we do come to this place where we're looking at, sort of parallels, right? I mean, FDR was breaking the mold. Kennedy. I mean, these guys are also, keep in mind, these guys are innovators. These guys are in place in times in which they are exceptional. You know, um, lots of guitar players and singers die every day, and nobody knows who they are because they weren't doing, or maybe they were doing something exceptional, but we just don't know about it. Half of everything is luck. So um, we're beginning to see this emerging kind of structure of martyrs. It's really what they are. We don't usually look at them that way because martyr, I think, suggests, in Western thinking, suggests a choice to die. And it is a choice. It's a choice to die in a way which is noticed. Uh, that's the fundamental point. When you become famous, for whatever it is, as we've discussed, music, politicians, and then, of course, soldiers are a slightly different thing because most soldiers aren't famous, though very many of them are. Uh, Maybe not many of them, but a certain select, a certain population of famous soldiers does exist throughout American history. Um, they are all famous in a mythological sense. And the reason that they're mythological is because we don't know these people, or very, very few of us do. And this kind of goes into a persona thing, that these figures are people that we perceive in a way. I don't know. I don't know Barack Obama. Let's just take one that's easy. I don't know Barack Obama. If Barack Obama died, let's say in office, then I would have a relationship to that would be primarily of my own making. It would be my interpretation of who Obama was and what he represented. Of course, a strong amount of that comes from what he has done, but that's a great example because according to the last election, half of America loves him and half of America hates him. But yet he's the same dude. He's doing the same things, and this is two different groups that are taking it. And that's a drastic oversimplification of the American population at large. But you see my point is that if I walk out onto the street and pick up my newspaper, one dude standing on the left of me has one opinion of who I am and what I did, and one dude standing on the right of me has potentially a completely different opinion. It's out of my control. It's out of his control if he just picked the wrong line of work, if he's worried about that. Now, so that's mythological because what that means is that it's a sort of gray area in what is true, what can be known, and also the significance, though. And that's something that rock stars and presidents and war heroes and these other people that are in those sorts of hero fields are inheritors of is mythological status. Um, they are human beings, but well, let me cut to it like this. Um, the study of the persona by Jung, the explanation of what the persona is that you have a conscious persona, you have a way in which you present yourself to people around you, and then there's also the secondary aspect, which is, as we've been discussing, that which is out of your control, and that includes how people perceive you that you didn't intend them to perceive you. Let's say, this was where like a lot of the mental health and stresses of these kinds of figures comes into play. How do you turn the persona off? How do you have personal relationships with people that you're treating as equals rather than as fans or subjects or lessers or whatever the case may be? Again, not insinuating ethics or anything, or morality in this case. So now you have these mythological humans and and they die. And the death is the part that I'm particularly interested in because I'm seeing it as almost sort of a an exchange for this elevated station of life that they were given while they were alive. You look at somebody like Kurt Cobain, for example. Kurt Cobain, in a relatively short amount of time, made money like it was going out of style. Like, I mean, went for a standard rags to riches tale, but I mean, the guy, after a point, he didn't even want it anymore. It was just falling at him, you know. And the luxury, he's a funny case because it didn't end up helping him too much, but the luxury that he had is that he could have stepped out on the sidewalk and just said, everybody must eat apples on Tuesday, and a large number of people would have eaten apples on Tuesday. Now, that's power. He had the power of influence. He had the power of being a mythical figure. And we're all mythical figures within the circles that we are. Um, you right now are watching me, and you're formulating an opinion of what kind of cocksucker I must be to say such obtuse, nonsensical things. But that's part of my persona. Now, your relationship to that, I'm a mythological figure to you. That's how that works. But these guys have simply these people have a much larger circle of people that they and even less substantiation to it. There um, there are so many people while he was alive, but now even after. Now this is when you get into real mythological territory. People that were born, years after the guy died, that have posters of him on their wall, right? So obviously they didn't know him. They didn't talk to him. I mean, I'm from Tennessee. I always love to remember when Dale Earnhardt died, and people put up little monuments in their gardens, and they wore T-shirts, and they had shit on the backs of their trucks and stuff that was like weird stuff that kind of like crossed the line, stuff that's like tombstones with the number 8 on it and stuff like we'll never forget Dale and shit. It's like I remember some dude referring to him as Dale. I was like, dude, you didn't know that guy. What do you don't fucking call him by his first name? It's so weird, like I'm gonna go home and listen to some Kurt. Like you wouldn't say that. That's awkward. Nobody would. It's kind of weird. Anyway, mythological figures, right? Of a hero, saga, legend status. Why do we love them though? Why do these figures permeate in this emerging American mythology that we're trying to stitch out? Well, I can't help but again, I can't help but focus on this whole death thing because with all of them, there's a sort of untimeliness to their death. Now, here's a great counterexample. Is like, well, not a counterexample. I think this sort of proves my point. Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, when you look at his presidency, is hugely unique, hugely substantial president. A lot of really wild shit happened while Jimmy Carter was president. He changed the game in a huge way, um, but he's not dead. And after his presidency, he has, I would say, and I can't back this up, I'm not going to say this is a fact. It would appear to me, just from my limited observations, that he has kind of led the way in works out of office, peace works, relaxed and groovy shit, and I feel like he's sort of still he's still sort of a kind of a lesser talked about dude. Somehow Clinton gets in front of Carter, and I think it might be because he, at least in popular perception, part of that is probably Carter's interest in not being in the public eye as much, but certainly to an extent, the way the scandal that consumed Clinton was on par with the type of tribulation that we look for in order to appreciate somebody. They have to be controversial enough. They have to, Bon Scott and choke on their own vomit before we can say that they had any value. Otherwise, they're just the singer of AC/DC, but now they're Bon Scott. They choked on their own vomit. So, we love them because they died. What does it mean? What does it mean to have a culture that is obsessed with these dying heroes? And why? Sorry, I just got a phone call, but I ignored it. I'm talking to you. Um, what does it mean to have a culture which is obsessed with these dying icons? What it means to me is, and this is where I'm going to have to close this video and get ready for the next one, if this one was any good. To me, it is a representation of fears and pains. We are, by nature, ooh, no, I take that back. I'm not going to say anything about what we are by nature. I'm not there yet. I'm not ready for that kind of YouTube video status. I would proposition you in a friendly wager that human beings are afraid of the notion of there not being anything bigger than them, right? That's simple enough. Even if you're a fairly intelligent and academic person, it's scary to think that this might be it, right? So this manifests a lot of different issues. This manifests the belief in God. This manifests, some would say the creation of God. I'm not going to go into all that stuff. That's far be it from me to argue about that. I would simply say that one of the things that we can do is we can create this relationship within humanity where we say we pick certain people in a variety of ways, mostly just by what we buy into. We pick certain individuals that we believe to be deserving of our attention, of our respect, of our funding is a big one. But all these things happen willingly. This isn't an accident. Kurt Cobain didn't come into your living room and make you give him money. Didn't come in and grab your children. Now, it could become that way once they get to once a certain amount of the population buys into them, they attain this sort of like unseen hand power that, you're going to hear them on the radio, you're going to see them on TV, they're going to pervade into the popular consciousness. But the point is, it's a more or less culturally, from total culture to individual or small group, it's essentially a willing trade, whereby we give you these means. We give you affluence of some sort. We give you money, influence. Um, Money and influence is enough. And what we get from you, and here's the thing, you remedy our fear because we live through you. And this doesn't mean necessarily this can be manifests in the red carpet culture. What are you wearing, who are you dating, stuff like that. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm saying more on the emotional level, more on the creative level. Because human beings, I do believe, I will make this blanket statement, that human beings are fundamentally creative creatures. But due to any number of different reasons, many of them will, at a very young age, cease to believe that about themselves. And they will select these other icons to be their representatives, more or less, in a cultural sense. So if you were a young person in the early 90s, you would willingly select Kurt Cobain as the representative of your emotions. And it's a perfectly, at least at ground level, it makes sense. It seems fairly healthy. And why do you do that, though? You do that because you are afraid of your emotions never having legitimacy. You are afraid of never really mattering, maybe. You know, you think if you're part of a cultural movement, a cultural phenomenon, then you are part of something that is bigger than you. That's this type of immortality, right? If you were at that Nirvana show, you're immortal to me in a way, you know. I mean, if you were at a show in my living room last weekend, you're immortal to me too. But that's another conversation as well. And that's what I'm going to leave it on, I think, for now. I think what I want to tackle next is the relationship between fear and pain and what the two signify, um, and why we have these strange relationships to them. But closing it on that is this American mythology that I think I've hopefully begun to delve into. Maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know. Um, Plenty of people think I am, but I hope you don't. And if you do, well, that's okay. Alright, Dan.